Hi, y'all, and welcome to tonight's live stream. Tonight, we are going to be attempting a bold new feat, like having both video and audio in the same video. So thank you for bearing with me last night through our tech chaos. And I'll go here and double check. Yes, okay, good. Thank goodness. Now, of course, last night was fully intentional. I was actually trying to break new ground for LawTube with an avant-garde silent film version of legal commentary. So I know some of you are very disappointed that I am not going to be doing more of that silent film attempt tonight. I'm very sorry about disappointing you. I am going to do my best to add some interpretive gestures during the video tonight while I explain things, just so you feel better about it. But truthfully, the really good news is that what is happening in this case is wild enough to make up for the loss of the artistic silence that I'm not going to be using tonight. So last week, there was a huge major shakeup in Kouri Richins' case. Now, she is a Utah mom who is accused of poisoning her husband, Eric, and then of having the gall to publish and promote a book about how she was helping her kids deal with their grief about losing their dad, the person she murdered. That's what prosecutors say happened. But there is now a critical prosecution witness who is changing sides from the prosecution side over to Kouri Richins' side. The prosecution has said that Eric Richins died because he was poisoned with a massive overdose of fentanyl. But Kouri's lawyers are saying that, and they now have submitted a new affidavit from the drug dealer who supposedly sold that fentanyl to the housekeeper, Kouri Richins, who sold it to Kouri Richins. And the drug dealer is saying he never sold fentanyl to Kouri Richins. So tonight we are going to be asking the question, with this change, does the state still have a case against Kouri Richins? We have to reevaluate everything and ask the question, if there's not evidence about her buying fentanyl, is there enough to convict her? So I'm going to do this in at least a couple of parts. First of all, tonight we're going to be looking at the Walt the dog letter, which is one of the single craziest pieces of evidence I have ever seen. It's shocking, and what makes it even harder to believe is that it is an entirely self-inflicted wound. Kouri Richins herself wrote this letter while in jail. So we're going to be reevaluating it. Is it still solid evidence against her, and just how important will it be at trial? So we're going to cover three basic topics tonight, or areas. The first is, just briefly, I'm going to go over the brand new flip in testimony to give you some context. Then I'm going to go over the Walt the dog letter and how the state got it. And we're going to think through, well, first we'll start with how the state got it, and then we'll think through the letter and take a look at it and what it actually is saying, and how it will be interpreted now. So we're going to be reevaluating, is this solid evidence against her, and how important is it going to be? So I want to say I have double thank yous. We have the first 5 from last night. I could not thank them. And we have the first 5 from tonight. And there's only one the same. So from last night, Michelle B, Betsy, Bex in Wonderland, Shiro Sheena, and Sky Goddess 87. And from tonight, Bama Queen and Oklahoma Gigi, Maria Z, and Bonbon RPH. And Betsy is our only double winner. So thank you to all of you. And Betsy, special shout out to you for being first in the top 5 2 nights in a row. So there's also a special announcement that I would have made yesterday had I actually, been able to speak to you. But since it was a silent video, I've decided to give you the silent version of what I would have said, and you can kind of interpret that. Okay, so tell me what you think it means. Put that in the chat and we'll see what you think. Also, would you please hit the like button? That lets YouTube know, especially after last night. Hello, we're awake. We're actually broadcasting, and we have sound tonight. So if you would hit the like button. If you aren't subscribed, we would love to have you back for more too. So is anybody guessing what this means? This is from yesterday. We're a day behind now, but it's what I would have said. So let's pull that out and I'll make this bigger and we can get started talking. So we're going to start with, like I said, the flip-in testimony. So in general, this case is about the death of a pretty young man, age 39, Kouri Richins. He was in fine health when he suddenly died. It was a shock to everyone, except, the prosecution says, to his wife, Kouri Richins. They say that she is the one who poisoned him. At autopsy, he had 5 times the lethal dose of fentanyl in his system. And prosecutors say that Kouri Richins slipped that dose to him in a mixed drink she made for him called a Moscow Mule. The prosecution is offering, or was anyway, they offered some pretty damning testimony about Kouri Richins buying fentanyl pills. So they had text messages she had with her housekeeper. And the housekeeper was going to come in and say that not only did she ask to buy drugs and did she ask to buy fentanyl, but she actually asked for stronger stuff. She wanted the good stuff, the real fentanyl stuff, and that she actually purchased fentanyl pills, the housekeeper did, at a gas station from a known drug dealer. She gave those to Kouri, and then Kouri, the prosecution will say, pass those on to Eric. But that story is up in the air now because the drug dealer has recanted. Initially, he had told police that that's exactly what happened. He sold fentanyl to the housekeeper and they met up at a gas station. He sold her the fentanyl. So if she sold it on to Kouri, in fact, she had fentanyl to sell, to give to Kouri. But now he says that he was out of it. He was not in his right mind. He was coming off drugs. He was detoxing at the time he was interviewed by police. And the real story, he says, is that he sold only oxycodone at the time. Later, he developed a supply line for fentanyl. Later, he sold that. But as of the time Eric died, he didn't have any way to do that. He didn't even have a source. So if that's true, then the prosecution is missing the link that shows that Kouri had access to fentanyl through the housekeeper and this drug dealer. Now, it's a huge and dramatic shift in the testimony, but where does it leave the case? And to be clear, and I want to be clear on a couple of things here, the jury does not have to believe the drug dealer's new testimony. Kouri wants the entire case against her dismissed because of this new affidavit she's filed. Now, she hasn't asked for that officially yet, but she really hinted at it. I think that is very unlikely. When you think about it, first of all, the drug dealer told police the first time that he sold fentanyl, and the jury is fully entitled to believe that. And secondly, the housekeeper said, I was asked to buy fentanyl and I did. And they can believe the housekeeper, the jury can believe the housekeeper over the drug dealer. So this is not, just because the drug dealer says something different now, doesn't mean the jury has to believe that. But the thing about it is, for the first time, this gives the jury significant reason to question whether or not Kouri Richins bought or even had access to fentanyl. Up until now, there was a pretty clear line from the fentanyl to Kouri, and then that would be something she could give to Eric. Now that might be missing. The jury at least could have some question marks around that. So is there enough evidence, even if they decide there's no proof that Kouri bought fentanyl from the housekeeper? That's what we're looking at. So tonight, like I said, we're going to be looking at one of the wildest and most bizarre pieces of evidence in the entire case, and that is the now infamous walk the dog letter. Now, from a prosecutor's point of view, this is just raw gold. This is such powerful evidence against Kouri Richins. But from the defense point of view, I would say in general, and certainly when they first found out about it, this is the moment when a defense lawyer drops their head into their hands and asks, why, oh, why didn't they become a doctor like their mother wanted them to do? It's really bad for Kouri Richins for a couple of reasons. One is what it says, but way worse is what it does to her case, what it makes the jury think about the testimony of every witness she puts up on the stand. because what the prosecutor says is that this letter shows Kouri Richins is trying to orchestrate a defense. She is trying to invent stories to have friends and her family members say when they get up on the stand, that everything those people say is suspect because Kouri is orchestrating it. She's writing make-believe scripts for them. That is really serious because it suggests that every witness that she puts on the stand is suspect. You don't know whether to believe them or not. And that's a serious problem for Kouri Richins for obvious reasons. It casts a pall over her entire defense. So let's talk about how the prosecution got the letter in the first place. And I want to say a special shout out to Romina, who is a new member. We are so glad to have you, Romina. Thank you for joining us tonight. And Laura has been a member for 11 months, joined with the Richard Allen trial. Thank you. That was a great trial to cover. That was, I thought, a really important trial. I'm glad you were with us for that. And Chico Karen has been a member for 19 months. That is forever. I think that's as long as we've had members. So thank you, Chico Karen. I'm really appreciated that. And she is giving a shout out to the mods, to whom I am so grateful. Marlon and Mama Pinks, long suffering and have done so much to make the chat a very pleasant, happy place. So thank you to both of them. And speaking of Mama Pinks, whose birthday was yesterday, happy birthday to Mama Pinks. For those of you who were unable to decode that very cryptic secret code I put in there. Oh no, she has a bad headache. I'm so sorry, Mama Pinks. But I'm glad that you like the birthday wishes. All right, so how did the prosecution get this Walt the Dog letter? And by the way, would you please hit the like button if you are just coming in? That will help YouTube wake up for us. So, all right, prosecution got the letter after on September 13th of 2023. Now, Kouri Richins was already in jail, and she had some kind of medical issue. We don't know what. Except at some point, I believe it was her brother suggested that the jail had given her the wrong medication and somehow she ended up sick, but we just don't have details. And I don't think we ever will because of HIPAA. And I think that all those details will be kept away from us. We do have the basics, and that is that Kouri Richins was taken to the hospital and she was out of her cell for a period of time. So the deputies went in and they searched her room. That's pretty typical if someone leaves the jail. But they did not find anything on that day. Later that day, the jail staff heard that Kouri had been talking to her mother on a video conference, and she was holding up a handwritten note for her mom to read. Now, normally, of course, calls are recorded, so the jail has audio of what's being said. But if she's holding up a piece of paper that they can't read from their video, that would suggest maybe she's trying to secretly communicate with her mother and she didn't want to say the words out loud. Maybe it was something she wasn't supposed to be doing. So she wanted to keep it silent. She was just going to hold the letter up, let her mother read it, and there would be no words to be recorded. So the jail staff sets out to find this paper. They want to find this paper to determine what was shown to the mother. So they searched her cell that day looking for that paper that she had argued, supposedly anyway, held up for her mother, and they don't find anything. They did find an envelope marked as going to Sky Lazaro. Now, at the time, Sky Lazaro was Kouri Richins' attorney. She no longer represents Kouri. She withdrew, but at the time, she represented Kouri. So the Sergeant Barrett, said he glanced inside this envelope to see what was there and to make sure that there was no contraband in it, because, of course, prisoners aren't allowed to hide drugs or anything like that inside an envelope to the attorney. They can't use that. So he said that he looked inside it, just glanced to make sure there wasn't anything there. He saw that it was marked to go to the attorney, which meant that it would be attorney-client privilege. So at that point, he stopped looking. So the next day, a different sergeant just searched Kouri's room again. And this time he looked in her top bunk area and he found an LSAT book. The LSAT or the LSAT is the exam that you take when you want to go to law school. And so she was studying for that using this book. So apparently Kouri Richins has said she now is interested in going to law school. Then this would be an exam you would take and your score would get sent to the law school. So he testified that inside that LSAT book, LSAT, he found a letter that he thought was like 8-9 pages long. And we have 6 pages of that the prosecution filed. Now, we're told that for sure there's a 7th page. And the reason there was a 7th page that we don't get to see is that the prosecution had an independent attorney look at it to determine whether there was anything that was truly attorney-client privilege. And the attorney pulled 1 page out, page 7. We don't really know if there ever even was a page 8 or 9, whether there's something missing. We do know from seeing this document, it's called Walk the Dog, the Walk the Dog letter, because written in big letters at the top of the first page is Walk the Dog. It's been come to be known. The prosecution filed it like that, Walk the Dog letter. And that was the nickname from then on. So this letter is a game changer for the defense, and they want to keep it out of evidence altogether. It's almost surely, in my opinion, I'm going to tell you why, not likely to be kept out of evidence altogether. But there are some things they're arguing, and I'll tell you what they're going to argue. First is that video of the search of Kouri's room, the video is kind of a little sketchy in that it keeps freezing. And that gives the defense, some room to talk about, what was going on, why were they searching, what were they doing, did someone plant this, that sort of thing. Secondly, the defense is arguing that the document was inside this pouch that was supposed to go to the attorney. And that seemed like suggesting that it might be privileged. It might be a communication between the attorney and the client that would be privileged. And then the prosecution wouldn't be allowed to look at that. But it's not a really great argument. Let me show you why. I'm going to show you the attorney-client privilege statute from Utah. This is not legal advice. I just looked this up, and I don't practice in Utah, but it's kind of standard for what lawyers see. So what is the privilege, the attorney-client privilege? A client has a privilege to refuse to disclose and to prevent any other person from disclosing confidential communications if the communications were made for the purpose or in the course of obtaining or facilitating the rendition of legal services to the client, and the communications were between the client or the client's representative and the legal professional. So to kind of break that down, just make it a little bit easier. The first problem I think Kouri's going to have with this being any kind of attorney-client privilege is that it has to be confidential. So courts have said that means you have to treat it like it's confidential. If you show the documents or tell if you are talking with someone else, then that breaks the privilege. So if you have this document and you show it to people other than your attorney, to a third party, that usually breaks the privilege and means it's not. So if this in fact is the letter that Kouri was showing to her mother, well, that could be a problem. Now, it may not be the same letter, but that's another issue. So problem 2, I think, is the communication has to be made for the purpose of obtaining legal advice. I'm going to make this a little different layout. Okay. And it doesn't sound, you'll hear it yourself, but I don't think it sounds like that at all. It sounds like it's written to Kouri's mother, and it tells her things to go tell Kouri's brother, but it never sounds like it's something that Kouri wanted to show to her attorney. I mean, it was a whole envelope to her attorney. She wouldn't have to write it this way at all. She could have just gone straight to the attorney. So, and then problem number 3 is that the communication has to be between the client and the attorney. So the client, it says, or the client's representative, but usually that's defined pretty technically under the law. It's not just someone in your family. It's not just someone who's rooting for you to win. It has to be someone who is literally your representative. And here, this is going from Kouri to her mother. There's nothing in here that suggests that the mom was supposed to show it to the attorney. And then, of course, like to make matters even worse, the extent they ever could have argued that it was attorney-client privilege, shortly after the prosecution filed this letter with the court, Kouri announced that this was all just part of a novel that she was writing. I'm going to remove it, make this bigger. So, and a novel is obviously not a communication that you're making to your attorney in order to obtain legal advice. So none of this made sense, in my opinion, as attorney-client privilege. So we'll see what happens. She will argue all kinds of things, that it's not relevant, etc. But I think she'll probably be stuck with this. And so I do want to take a look at it. So, all right, we're going to add this back, and we're going to actually take a look at the document itself, the Walt the Dog letter. And you can see immediately why it was called the Walt the Dog letter, okay? So she starts at the top. She says, Walt the dog, but take vague notes so you remember. So already you can see that sounds kind of sketchy, right? Take vague notes, like don't write anything down. I don't want this to be known that I told you this is how it sounds. But she wants her to remember it pretty specifically. Sky, the attorney, is saying even if the gummies have fentanyl in them, the prosecutor will say, I tried to put the fentanyl in the gummies so Eric would have them. Stupid, I know, but that's what she's thinking. We will still test them, though. However, she wants to link Eric getting drugs and pills from Mexico, so we need some kind of connection. Her private investigator is doing some research on the ranch cartel place Eric would stay at. So to some extent, I think if we kind of rethink this in light of the fact that the drug dealer is saying he didn't sell fentanyl to the housekeeper, who then couldn't have sold it to Kouri. So if we try to put the hat on that, like, yes, that's possible. Let me assume that she is innocent, and let me assume that that's true for a minute. Then this is helpful, right? Because it's Kouri trying to work through where the fentanyl come from, and that, but notice kind of the way she's doing it. And she's saying it's ridiculous for them to think I would have been the source. Maybe it was in the gummies. We've got to figure out how Eric got this. And we think he got it from Mexico. So we're going to be looking for that connection. So put in the best possible light for Kouri Richins. That's how this would be interpreted. So, but let's keep reading. Here's what I'm thinking, but you have to take to Ronnie. He would probably have to testify to this, but it's super short, not a lot to it. He will need to tell Scott at the meeting next week. So here's what she's saying, that it sounds as if she's suggesting, here's a story that I want my brother Ronnie to tell. Now, and he's going to have to testify to this, so take this to him, but it's short. It won't be a lot to it, which sounds like he's going to have to remember it for the first time. There's no need for it to be short and easy to remember if it's just the truth. He simply would remember it. And that's why this is so incredibly damaging for her, even though some of it is helpful. So let's keep reading. Upon information and belief, just like they say, a year prior to Eric's death, Ronnie was over watching football on Sunday, and Eric and Ronnie were chatting about Eric's Mexico trips. Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico from the workers at the ranch. Not to tell me, because I would get mad, because I always said he just gets high every night and won't help take care of the kids. So let's stop right there and analyze it. Now, I need to warn y'all. Let's see if is there any way. I will see where I am. Okay. So what happened was, I'm showing you the actual letter that was attached by the prosecution. I have retyped it because it was hard for me to read, and I knew it would slow me down reading it to you if I tried to read it from the screen. So I may not switch pages at the exact time. That's what I'm worried about. So, okay, this whole clause, upon information and belief, and just like they say, she says that more than once, as if somehow putting that in makes it legal, and she's heard people say that in the legal field. So it makes it sound like she's just putting that in, this is how we're going to say it. It's just upon information and belief, as if this is what I think Ronnie will say. But that, if it's the truth, you would think she would just, instead of saying, a year prior, he was over watching football, they were chatting about his trip, she would just say, remember that time you came over? Tell Ronnie to remind Ronnie that there was that time he came over and they were watching football, and Eric told him this because the next day he told me that Eric had said this and he was real upset or whatever. And it doesn't sound like that. See, it sounds like she's coaching this. But then you move into the Eric told Ronnie he gets pain pills and fentanyl from Mexico and not to tell her because she would get mad. That part, if true, would be helpful for Kouri, because if the pain pills and the fentanyl are actually something Eric's getting, then it's something, and that she doesn't know about it, then that would explain why she isn't able to tell the police where it came from, because she wasn't told about it. And she goes on to say, there are pictures in my phone of Eric passed out on the floor or in the chair. Ronnie should have texts from Eric talking about getting high as well. Eric told Ronnie he keeps them in an allergy pill bottle in his work truck so I wouldn't find them. This is super important if true, and here's why. The fentanyl pills weren't found in the house, which is very confusing. For the prosecution, they're wondering, okay, if this guy took this overdose of fentanyl on his own, where's the stuff? Like, where's the bottle it came out of? I mean, he's dead. So how does he get up and throw it out? And if he did throw it out, why didn't we find it in the trash can? Like, it doesn't make sense. There should be some paraphernalia around, something that would indicate he took this, and it's gone. So that suggests to us the prosecution, Kouri Richins, cleaned up. So what she's saying here is it was out in the work truck and she wouldn't have found it. So he was trying to hide it from her. So that's an interesting story. We're going to hear more about that in just a minute. Ronnie never told me about the conversation. Eric finally told me and asked if Carmen could get him some. Eric never wanted anyone to know he had an issue, especially get caught. He always wanted Kouri to go down for him. Now, I think I can switch somewhere in this. So let's switch to page 2 for y'all. Okay. So, okay. So at this point, she's saying, it's like pretty convenient, right? Why would I write the housekeeper and ask for this? Well, it was just for Eric. And Eric was always trying to avoid looking like he had a drug problem, but he had a secret drug problem. And the fact that it was secret explains why his family is all puzzled about this. They're like, what drug problem? He never had a drug problem. He didn't take anything. So she's now going to tell a story that almost, I wonder if there's some truth around this, because it's no longer what Ronnie is supposed to say. She just starts talking about something here. When they traveled, Eric would put his drugs in Kouri's bag at the airlines right before they boarded. That way, if they were caught, Kouri got in trouble, not him. Once they got to wherever they were going, Eric would pull the drugs out of her bag and it would cause a huge fight. She was pissed he would risk her going to jail for his drug use. He just would laugh about it. Eric couldn't ruin his image that he had drug issues, so he would do whatever he had to. Kouri had never done any type of pills, didn't like them. Rarely would she consume THC, only if Eric begged her because it was a special occasion. So in the end, they would kind of get into some self-serving stuff. Well, I personally never did that, and only if he begged me and so forth. But the whole story around the bag, I wonder if there's truth to that, if that ever happened, if there are any witnesses who will say that. And I wonder too about the story that Eric didn't want to ruin his reputation and was taking drugs. Eric's family vehemently denies this. They say this is totally false, made up by Kouri Richins entirely. So what we're trying to do is think through, in light of the new information that the drug dealer is, at least currently, going to testify he didn't sell fentanyl. Where did the fentanyl come from? Kouri has an explanation. Kouri's explanation is Eric bought it himself, maybe in Mexico, and he was hiding this drug problem from everybody. So that's what this paragraph will do for her. But here we get again into the part that really damages Kouri Richins so much. Reword this however he needs to make the point. Just include it all. And again, this sounds like she's writing it. Reword it how he needs to is irrelevant if he's just telling the story, if he's just talking about what happened and what he recalls. She doesn't need to tell him to reword it. She just needs to tell him, be sure to tell the truth. The connection has to be made, she says in the letter, with Mexico and drugs. Ronnie will have the messages to prove Eric confided in him about getting high. Now, again, this part about Ronnie will have the messages, if that's true, that really should be pretty provable. There should be messages and information, data on his phone that would date the time that Eric confided in him about getting high. If that really happened, and it really happened prior to Eric's death, and was something where Eric was actually admitting this, it seems like the defense will have evidence of that. They'll be able to show the timing, and they will be able to prove it. We'll see, right? We haven't seen the messages yet. That doesn't mean anything. We don't have the defense evidence yet. It can be, we'll keep reading. It can be short and to the point, but it has to be done upon information and belief, LOL. So this is just so damaging because it just sounds like she's creating this for him. And that's why the prosecution wants to use it and why the defense wants to keep it out. And this whole upon information and belief again, and then LOL. What's funny about this? There's nothing funny about this. There's no LOL here. This is all VS, very serious. If this is something that really happened and she's being falsely charged, then by all means, she should be reminding Ronnie about what he knows, but it's not funny. And it's odd that she puts that in here. So let's go on. Another point in her favor. They never found pain pills or fentanyl in my house because he hid it in allergy bottle in work truck, and Cody emptied out work truck within a week. So they were never found. Now that actually would be an interesting explanation for what happened if it's true, because where is the missing fentanyl? Even if Kouri is the one who bought it, where did it come from? You know, if the drug dealer and Carmen, the housekeeper, weren't the source, where did it come from and where did it go? And according to this, she's going to say, or her story will be, that it was in the work truck, which I assume police truly did not search, and that it was cleared out by Cody, that's the partner of Eric, and that it must have been out there and maybe Eric took it. Not Eric, sorry, Cody, the friend, the partner, took it. They were partners in a business that they ran together. So that would be the first explanation we have for what happened to this. Of course, an alternate explanation the prosecution will say is it's because you got rid of it. We don't know where, but somewhere, because you wanted to hide the fact. And that would explain the extra steps you took right around the time of discovering that he was dead. And she had some data on her phone that suggested extra steps were taken. That would explain why you took the extra steps. You were busy hiding this. And that would also explain why there was nothing there. You were still alive and able to hide it. Wait, let's keep reading. When you talk to Ronnie about this, and I can switch pages for you now, I think. We're going down to page 3. Okay. When you talk to Ronnie about this, meet up with him in person. I worry sometimes your house and phone are bugged. Maybe drive down to SL, which I think is Salt Lake, and meet him after work without Bree, which was his girlfriend or wife. I don't know which. Sky has to make the connection between Eric and Mexico because that makes the most sense in her mind. If it's Ronnie's information and belief about the conversation over football, she can use that as a connection. Tell Ronnie, don't overanalyze it. It was a quick 2-minute conversation, LOL. Tell him I need him to do this. Bring me home, and then we will get those damn bitches, which I believe is a reference to the sisters of Eric, who, for pretty clear reasons, are very upset about what's happened. So, and think through this in terms of it being presented at trial. Okay, she's talking, she doesn't want her mother to just say this over the phone. She doesn't even want Ronnie's girlfriend / wife, I think they got married right in this time frame, that she doesn't want them to know, the girlfriend to know about it. Only Ronnie. They should meet privately, separately. They should meet in person so nobody can overhear what they're discussing. When in fact, if this is actual evidence, this is something Kouri would want everyone to know about. It's something her attorney would be filing. She would be filing things saying, you know, look, you've totally got this wrong. Here's an affidavit from the brother telling you that Eric confided in him. Here are text messages from the brother saying that Eric confided in him. We would be wanting this out if this were actually real. And so it makes it look very suspicious, just the wording around this. And once again, we've got that LOL. It was, tell him don't overanalyze it. It was just a quick 2-minute conversation. LOL sounds like this isn't something Ronnie's known about up until now. You can see where this makes it so difficult for Ronnie to come in and testify to this, even if this turned out to be completely true. And if he does get on the stand, then he'll be asked about it, right? Because he'll be asked, well, isn't it true? Is it true that you had this 2-minute conversation? Oh, it's not true. Why? Did your sister put this in a letter? Why did your sister want you to say this? Is it because your sister would say absolutely anything in order to get out of the fact that she murdered her husband? That kind of question will be really obvious. So keep reading. Also, please text Lotto or call. Tell him, do not text me anything about us doing things together ever, like church, skiing, trip, nothing that puts us together. It doesn't look good. Okay, Lotto, I believe, is a reference to the person she was seeing while she was married to Eric. There have been references in the documents in the court to her having a relationship with someone during this period of time and texting this person even the night that Eric died. And so tell him, do not text me anything about us doing things. It doesn't look good. Brings this into front and center, shows this relationship and that she's trying to hide it and she's trying to look good. So none of this looks positive for Kouri. And she says, we're so close to the end. Let's push through, have the conversation with Ronnie before he meets with Sky, the attorney, then tell him to tell Sky at the meeting about the conversation. Hang in there. We're almost there. Love you to the moon. So, and this is again reference to Ronnie telling Sky this, but it sounds like he doesn't know about it. Be sure to tell Ronnie so he can tell Sky what his story is, as if he wouldn't know. It's not just a reminder. And another reference, take vague notes of all of this so you remember before you walk the dog. And by the way, I looked up walk the dog, like what does this mean? And although there are numerous meanings, one possible meaning according to Google, is that in a more recent slang context, it means walk the dog. Walk the dog or dog walk means to completely dominate, overpower, or defeat someone in a competition or confrontation. So it could mean go out there and get them, Mom. Let's win this. Win one for the Gipper. So then she goes on to talk in the next page. I saw a commercial yesterday, Utah Mortgage Relief. Google them, please. It's for people behind on their mortgage. Can you see if they can help at all on Marissa's house, please? We have to get hers, yours, and Chelsea's taken care of ASAP. Try to go to that place in Commerce. What about asking Lotto to do a loan solely in his name and not have you on there? I know he can do a home equity line of credit on his house in Hideout. Not sure if he would, but I know he has like $1 million in equity. Maybe he just doesn't know about a HELOC, home equity. If he wants to help me taking care of these loans, most important, I don't give a S about the yotels. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe a yurt that's used as a hotel. That's all I can figure. So this is important because the prosecution says that the motive for Kouri is that she needed money, constantly out of money. She could not make the payments on her very expensive house flipping business unless she had Eric's credit and Eric's money. And he had a lot of life insurance. That's what she was counting on and planning on when she murdered Eric. That's the prosecution theory about what her motive is. And this sort of indicates she is having financial troubles. Now, she's asking whether maybe the boyfriend, Lotto, could help them all out by taking out a $1 million home equity loan, a HELOC on his house. Bad plan, Lotto. But anyway, I don't know if he did or not, but that sounds not the best idea. And now she says, remember, I told you one way to get at Katie, she is one of the sisters of Eric, is going through my phone and finding a picture of her girls, even with the boys, meaning Kouri, I assume this means Kouri Richins' own boys. So we'll keep reading and then we'll talk about what this means. Print 15 copies and send them out anonymously to different media companies. Obviously, don't email the picture so it's not traceable. She would be livid if it got out to the public. You would just have to do it sneakily, which I think was sneakily, and be careful. She would try and trace it back to you. If not, no worries. So this is just terrible, terrible, terrible look for Kouri Richins, because what it sounds like she's saying here, and what the prosecution will argue, is that she's saying, even if you have a picture that includes my own children, you would think, right, the mother would want to protect her own children. But even if it's going to out my kids, this would get Katie so upset, just bother her so much, not accomplish anything for Kouri's case, just bother Eric's sister so much that it's worth it to me to break the privacy of her girls, even if it hurts the privacy of my boys. So just go ahead and put the picture out there in public. I would rather have my boys outed as long as her girls are outed, because that'll bother her and it'll be livid, underlined, livid. And do it sneakily. You don't want it traced to you, and it's okay if this is too extreme even for you. They may be able to get this particular paragraph struck. I certainly think they ought to try. It isn't directly relevant to the question around the murder. It doesn't have anything to do with motive. It doesn't have to do with the drug use. So I can see them being able to strike this. And honestly, it's so prejudicial that I can see the judge saying, yeah, we're not letting this in. But think about it, how bad it looks, because it looks like she's vengeful. She hates Eric's family she hates Eric's family more than she cares about her own children. That's how the prosecution will play it if they're able to get it in. I think they might not get this paragraph in. Okay, we'll keep reading. Sky is having my girls do the first interview with Good Morning America. Please tell Chelsea to bring out that he hasn't been to church in the 13 years she has known him. And Eric would brag to her about how much he drank and did pills in high school. Tell Kelsey to say Eric always wanted Kouri to go down for him. For example, he would put drugs in her suitcase when we would travel together. So if anyone got caught, it was Kouri. Okay, so first of all, she's telling Chelsea, and hear how it sounds more like she's reminding Chelsea. She wants Chelsea, tell Chelsea to bring out, as if Chelsea already knows this. So Chelsea, one of the things you should point out is something you and I already know about, and that's that Eric hasn't been to church in 13 years, and he bragged about using pills and so forth in high school. And but then we get to tell Kelsey to say, quote, Eric always wanted Kouri to go down for him. Sounds more like she's instructing her. For example, he would put drugs in her suitcase when we would travel together. Now, that may be true, but you see how this casts some suspicion on it? It's kind of, oh, well, yeah, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what that means anymore. Is it real? And I believe that they did not do an interview with Good Morning America, almost certainly because this came out, and it discredits anything they say so dramatically, because if they say it, they'll say, well, are you just saying this because you were told to, or is it true? And of course, the friends are probably going to say, I'm saying it's because it's true, but everyone is left with this little doubt in the back of their minds. Is it? Is it not? Did he put drugs in her suitcase? Did he not? And the fact that she calls them my girls also suggests, obviously, they have her interests at heart. Of course, that's also true of Eric's family. That doesn't necessarily disqualify a witness. It's just something that you see there. He would put it in her bag right before they left the house. Let's see if I'm ready to. Yep, we're ready to move to the next page for you. Okay. All right. He would put it in her bag right before they left the house, so Kouri didn't know. Then when we would land wherever, Eric would take them out of her bag, and Kouri would be pissed, and they would argue about it. Tell Kelsey to say how Eric didn't care and would just laugh about it and say, well, I can't get in trouble. And if it was okay, as if it was okay that I got in trouble. Have Selma talk about Eric in Spain not being able to drink, so he was looking for drugs the entire time. So that part sounds more true. in the sense that she's saying, have her talk about it, not tell her to say this quote, but have her recall and talk about this, and explain the drink the waitress gave him and how I called his doctor and went to the pharmacy immediately. Have Allie talk about how the sisters have always been jealous of me because anything they could do, Kouri could do better. Being a mom, college, stay-at-home wife until she built $1 million company, a nice house, car, everything she had, they wanted. This comes down to jealousy, money, and Eric's partying that they don't want to acknowledge, and sadly, an accidental overdose. So here's Kouri giving the one-line summary of what the defense would be, at least to her way of thinking, and that it's all about jealousy. But of course, this is Kouri setting herself up. Will the jury like that? Will they be offended? Some questions around that. And lastly, don't forget to work on the gun receipt. Okay, so I'm double checking, just make sure we still have sound and audio every now and again. I like to check over there, and I've been over here in the document for a while. All right, lastly, don't forget to work on the gun receipt. We want to file charges and let the prosecutor not do anything about it to use in our defense. So she's outed one of her defenses, but she's told a third party what it was, which is why it isn't privileged, I think. Will you buy a box of Crest White strips, open them up, put in an envelope, and have Sky give them to me? You can tell her what's in the envelope. I'm sure she won't care. I'll make sure they can't be found in my cell. My teeth are yellow from so much coffee and tea all day. I love you. I love you. I love you. Hang in there. We're getting there slowly. You're the best mom in the whole world. I'm so lucky to have you. And let's see, are we ready to go to page 6? Yes, we are. There you go. So we were past ready to go to page 6. So you see what she's saying here could be damaging for her attorney, Sky Lazaro, because no contraband is supposed to be passed in that attorney-client privileged envelope. It's kept there so that there can be privileged communications and they can protect that privilege between the attorney and the client. But you saw, or you heard me talk earlier about how the sergeant looked in it just to see if he saw any contraband in it. That's not allowed. So she can't send in things. And for obvious reasons, you don't really know what's in it. So she's trying to suggest that her attorney would willingly smuggle things for her. Now, it was shortly after that Sky Lazaro withdrew from the case, but I don't think it had anything to do with the Crest White strips. Just in case you were wondering, I don't think that's the reason. Okay, let's pull that out and talk a little bit. Let me make my picture all the way, same full size. And let's talk a little bit about what we can conclude from this. So reading back through it, because I really wanted to rethink it, I believe the changing of the testimony by the drug dealer is potentially very credible because of what he said. Because he said, I was high, I was detoxing, I was out of my mind. It doesn't seem to be in his best interest to change his story. If anything, you think, for example, of the Donna Adelson case. Remember the 2 jailhouse informants who came forward? They say Donna was offering them bribes and money and a house and gifts for their children and so forth. But that paled in comparison to what the state could offer, which was freedom. And so they turned all that down and went to the state. That was what we were told, and that's what the state argued. They came and told the state the truth rather than lie for Donna Adelson because they were going to get a better deal from the state. So to me, the drug dealer, his best place to go would be to the state to get some kind of mercy, to get some kind of deal. And the fact that he's not doing that and changing his testimony, that's fairly powerful. Now, we haven't seen him testify, and that can make all the difference. If he's real believable, then this is a problem for the state. If he's not all that believable and there's some sketchy reason he's done this, totally different. In that case, it's going to look like Kouri is just somehow manipulating things behind the scene, although we don't really know anything about that yet. The prosecution will be fleshing all that out, I have no doubt, talking to him and trying to get the full story. So we have a change in story that I think asks us to reevaluate the evidence. This letter is still completely terrible for Kouri Richins. It does have some facts in there that would help and that would mesh with some of the things that the drug dealer is going to say now. That she didn't have fentanyl, that she isn't the one who got it, that maybe Eric got it because she didn't have a source, at least that the source wasn't this drug dealer and the housekeeper, Carmen. But that's where it stopped as far as being good for her, because overall, it's very damaging because it suggests that her witnesses may have been prepped, their testimony may have been created, fabricated to help her. So it's brutal for her if this letter comes in. And I think parts of it may be struck, but my guess is that the judge is going to let at least parts of it in evidence. So I think it is still powerful evidence against her, but mostly powerful evidence, not that she committed the murder, but that she's willing to lie to get out of this. And then that casts doubt on her entire case. So still open question, what about the other evidence that the state has against Kouri Richins? Is that altered by what we're seeing here? All right, so if you have some questions, if you would put those in the chat now with question marks at the beginning, it'll help me spot it. If you are just coming in, if you would hit the like button, I would really appreciate that. Pascaline asked me a question over here in the super chat, and thank you, Pascaline. Wanting to know, does Kouri even have a dog? I don't think so. I really don't think she literally meant like, Walt the dog, don't forget to take my dog out for a walk. Although she might, maybe her mother has her dog. Maybe that's actually going to be story. But let's go back to what she said, because let's see that Walt the dog. Here's what she said. Exactly. Take vague notes of all this so you remember before you walk the dog. What's connecting vague notes and walking the dog? And then there was at the top, it said, walk the dog, exclamation point, double exclamation points, but take vague notes so you remember. So yes, I can see that being an argument that Kouri's team makes, is that this vague notes is, this walk the dog just referred to her dog. She just, her mom forgot to walk her. I can see that maybe. I don't know if she had a dog though, Pascaline. It's an interesting idea. And do I think that now beyond a reasonable doubt is difficult to reach? It's not a case with a ton of evidence against Kouri. There's the circumstantial evidence that she needed the money, that she had lied repeatedly to use or get or try to get Eric's money, that she had life insurance policies on Eric that she thought she would get that she didn't get. Ultimately, the sister got, or I guess Eric had the policies, and that she needed money, that she was taking out loans and so forth. But the judge broke several of those counts out and put them in another case. He's like, yeah, this is too different. I really respected that. I felt like that should have happened with the Murdaugh case. I felt like they mixed the financial with the crime too much. And I really respected that the judge moved some of those out and said, we're going to handle those separately rather than, and I mean, the Murdaugh case was tried. They were tried separately. Well, the second time he just pled guilty, but to the financial. But I just felt like it came in and sort of mixed in with the murder case itself too much. So with Kouri Richins, as far some of those are going to be out, but those financial crimes are part of motive. But motive, where's the evidence? She says she came back and found him dead. She says she made him one drink. Where's the evidence that she gave him fentanyl? There's no proof that she had access to fentanyl. If there's no glass that was tested that had fentanyl in it, then what's the evidence? And there are some pieces of evidence. I'm just saying it's a lot different. For example, here's a couple. In Eric's system, there also was a little bit of a drug that had been prescribed to Kouri, a different drug, and apparently not a lot, not enough to have been the cause of his death, but could have been the cause to make him sleepy or something. And then, of course, there's the fact that there was no pill bottle or evidence of these pills. So where did Eric get them from? If he took the fentanyl himself, how did he do it? There wasn't a syringe. There weren't pills sitting there. There was no pill bottle. Where did it come from? So I think those sorts of things are still there. And remember that there is still evidence that the housekeeper is going to say that Eric Richins, that she sold fentanyl to Kouri, so Kouri could have had it. Now, the drug dealer can say one thing, but just the fact that the drug dealer says that doesn't mean everybody has to believe it. But it does mean that Kouri now has at least one powerful argument. Oh, dial in for Mildred saying, yes, this is exactly what we were just talking about. Didn't the autopsy find that Kouri's antipsychotic med was in his stomach and system? And didn't he realize she was poisoning him? So there were definitely the autopsy found, I think it was, I'm not going to say it right, quintazepine, maybe something like that was prescribed to Kouri and that he had in his system. Although in and of itself, that wouldn't prove that Kouri gave it to him, but it does prove it was Kouri's medication. But he did mention to people that he thought perhaps she was poisoning him, or at least he said to people that on one occasion, he said he thought she had given him poison. On another occasion, he said, if anything happens to me, look at her. I think she might have been the one who did it. So those, and yes, you can add that into the mix of things. There's going to be a fight over whether that comes into evidence, because there isn't evidence that she poisoned him at some other time, but it will definitely be a fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if the judge let that in. Asian Posh Doreen has been a member for 13 months. First of all, thank you. I appreciate that. Saying this case is going to be messy and is convinced that there was actual murder here and that it was by Kouri. So thank you for your comment. I appreciate that. It is going to be messy. There's no question about that. So I'm going back to look at questions up here. Okay, I see Annie with a question. There's and she's asking about the evidence apart from this. The prosecution may be sanctioned, but this case seems strong anyway. Thoughts, please. And Annie K is pointing to a point. It's not just that it's not just that the drug dealer has changed his testimony and it's now favorable for Kouri. It's not just that. It's that Kouri's team is saying the prosecution didn't tell them. They found out in April and they never bothered to say the drug dealer has changed his story. And the defense happened to find out in September. And that is damaging to them. But Annie K is saying the prosecution may be sanctioned, but the case seems strong anyway. There are other pieces of evidence. You may remember at the beginning, I even said this is like just the first part, because the Walt the dog letter was so insane to me. I wanted to look at that and think about it in terms of what the evidence is. But there is, of course, other evidence that came in, particularly at the preliminary hearing. So I do want to go back through that. And let's talk about that too. How is that? Can we still, assuming the drug dealer is right, assuming the jury believes him in his change of testimony, is there still enough left over? And I think we've talked about some of those, but good question. Maria Z asking, isn't any statement given while intoxicated or detoxing automatically not valid? No, it can still be valid despite the fact that for example, let's say someone is intoxicated and they're brought in for questioning and they say, okay, I killed him. They're not going to eliminate it just because a person was intoxicated. They're not going to say, okay, well, he confessed, but once he sobered up, he realized that was really dumb. He shouldn't have confessed. It's still going to come in. It's not going to eliminate the confession or the fact. But I think in this context, it's important because it's an explanation by the drug dealer about why he would have changed his story. That he was high or at least still detoxing and out of his mind. Says he doesn't even remember what he said. He was told later that he had said that he sold fentanyl. He said, I don't know what I was talking about. I didn't even have fentanyl. I had no line of fentanyl at the time. I sold drugs, but I didn't sell fentanyl yet. I sold fentanyl a good while later. So that's just like, even if she thought she was getting fentanyl, I didn't have any. I gave her something else. That's sort of the story that he's told. And it has some believability to it. So that's why we're reevaluating everything. So Susan, could the Walton Dodd letter be considered witness tampering, and could Kouri get additional charges for it? Here's why I don't think so, Susan D. It's not that if it had been found and he had already come forward and testified to that, yeah, maybe, but it didn't happen. Instead, right away, this letter comes out and there's never really any known way for the mother to have taken it to the brother. So that probably didn't happen. And therefore, I don't think there would be additional charges. And now it is maybe attempted witness tampering, but not charges for actual witness tampering. It is a mess. It is literally just an absolute mess for the defense to deal with. Very difficult. Okay. All right. I think I answered questions. So I'm so glad to have video and audio again. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. And I will look forward to seeing all of you on what is that? Tomorrow night at 7 p.m. Eastern. See you then.